Thank you for connecting. I think we can start because we already have 50 people connected. So this is a good start. My name is Romain Crouzet. I'm in charge of the programs for Climate Change Association. I welcome all of you, all the speakers, and all the more than 50 participants. This session is being translated on live, so you can click at the bottom of your screen on interpretation and choose the channel French or English. I'll start in English and then probably shift to French for the question and answer part. This session is being recorded and will be made. We will make it available afterwards on our website and send it to all the people who registered. You can ask your questions in the Q&A chat box. And if we have time, we'll try eventually to open to some questions by the mics. So only if we have time, maybe we can use the raise the hand system. Just for a short introduction, Climate Change is an association which gathers all the non-state actors in their diversity. Our idea is to create more synergy between non-state actors, meaning the 9 major groups recognized by the UNFCCC. So mostly local authorities, NGOs, businesses, but also researchers, women organizations. So wait, sorry. Climate Change, we have many different activities as a website where we put a lot of information in about climate action, both in French and English. We have an observatory also, which analyzes the climate action at the local level worldwide. It's a publication we have every year, which is very interesting for experts from different sectors. But also we organize every year summits with coalitions. We gather within those summits, and each coalition has a roadmap we try to follow up. And in the situation you all know of COVID, unfortunately, our summits are not being possible right now. So we were supposed to have one summit in September in Rwanda, which is not possible. That's why we decided to organize these virtual workshops once a week on specific topics, on specific coalitions. So we keep mobilizing our community and try to follow up on our roadmaps and activities. So that's why we are here, and we are having those workshops every Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. Parisian time, French time. So now we are having 2 main rounds of workshops. The first round is mostly to present some of our works from the observatory, Climate Change Observatory, and to get back in touch with our coalitions, like today for the coalition on access to finance. So we will have this first round where we try to see with different actors of this coalition how they are being affected in their activities about the COVID situation. And during the fall, we will have another round of workshops to try to deep in a bit more in detail into our activities on each roadmap for each coalition. So that's the idea of those workshops. So today, today's webinar is about is on question of inclusive access to climate finance during the COVID crisis. So that's why we invited our co-leaders of this coalition and actors from the finance sector to follow up on this topic. We already had an important workshop last year during our last summit about access to finance for climate actors. And we would like to see how and discuss how sources of finance are being available for local and non-state actors during the COVID pandemic and how this is affecting you guys. So that's why to start, I will present first all the speakers, and then each of the speakers are gonna present what they are doing for 10 minutes max. We'll have some questions for each speakers, and then we open for question and answers, finishing in 55 minutes now. So the first speaker will be Rafael Moser, Program Officer at the UNCDF, which is a UN organization which works on local climate adaptive living facility. I mean, they launched this initiative, which is local climate adaptive living facility, local. This initiative supports local governments in incorporating climate issues into their planning and budgeting. Then we will give the floor to Titilope Akosa, the Executive Director of the Center for the 21st Century Issues. She's the coordinator also of the Gender Monitors for Africa at the Green Climate Fund, GCF, aiming to track, monitor, and influence flows from the GCF for gender responsive climate action. And Titilope is based in Nigeria. Then we will talk with Thierry Chekpo from the Groupement intercommunal des Collines, which is an association of municipalities from Benin. He's in charge of the partnerships, so he will give us more the point of view of local authorities. And in the end, Justine Audrain, she's the Deputy Program Director of FMDV, the Global Fund for Cities Development, which helps local authorities to source finance for urban development, and which also provides technical and project planning support to local authorities. So, Rafael, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me. Let me just share my screen as I speak. So I just would like to start by thanking you and also Climate Change for inviting us to the workshop today. And say also good morning, good afternoon, bonjour à tous. So the idea is to speak a little bit about our experience accessing climate finance during this context of COVID. I hope you guys can see my screen. And then talk a little bit about how we do that through what we call performance-based climate resilience grants. So just to give you a bit of introduction, Romain has just briefly talked about local. So UNCDF, for those of you who know UNCDF, so the United Nations Capital Development Fund is a financing arm of the UN. So we are specialized in providing grants, loans, and guarantees. But then we have our focus is to work primarily with the least developing countries, so the LDCs. Even though we can work with other developing countries, but our focus is on LDCs. And then we have above 30 years of experience work with these performance-based climate resilience grants. So the whole idea of this mechanism is to establish a national pool of basket of funds at the national level, whereby we can channel funds through central government. So using existing frameworks in the country, like intergovernmental fiscal transfer systems, to channel finance to cover the additional cost of making investments at the local level climate resilient. It's around a 10-20% top up on top of regular capital grant allocations going to the local governments, so that they can have funds to invest in resilience activities at the local level. And then we do that through what I said, this performance-based climate grant, which means that in order for local governments to access the funds, they need to comply with a set of indicators of performance and also minimum conditions of access, which have to do with indicators about governance, good governance, public financial management, so how well they are managing funds at the local level, but also indicators which are related specifically with adaptation. So if they are, they're taking climate risk assessments at the local level to inform their planning at the local level. So all of this, towards the end of each financial cycle, we have independent assessors that go and assess their performance based on those indicators. So depending on the allocation of the level of performance each of the participating local governments will have, the subsequent allocations, so for the subsequent year, will vary slightly, can be slightly higher or slightly lower, depending on their performance. So the whole idea is to create an emulation among participating local governments so they can improve performance. And then we can easily identify areas in which need more assistance and technical capacity support. And then to do that, we have a list of what we call eligible investment, which is actually very broad. So, and it's also linked to adaptation. We try to integrate eligible sectors with the country's NDCs and the national adaptation plans when they exist. So we make sure that the activities are actually targeting adaptation. So it's very broad, and it's also within the local government's remit of action. So just to give an idea about Local, where we are now, so Local is implemented through different phases. We have basically 3 different phases to implement Local. So we start very small with a pilot, and then increasing the capacity, the absorption capacity of local government so that they can improve their performance along the that I have mentioned, so that we can reach the 3rd phase when we have the national rollout. So we expect that, by the end of the 2nd and 3rd phase, we have a full scale up of the mechanism to all the local government countries so that they can access these block grants directly, and also we have mobilized resources along the way. So as the COVID-19 pandemic was declared, so of course, as many of you, all of us have been affected, but UNCDF was actually very quick in coming up with approaches and strategies to actually support, based also on our framework, our target sectors. So UNCDF, as I said before, is a finance arm of the UN for financing capital development. And then we work primarily with 3 sectors. So first one with at the individual household level, we have the digital channels. So one of the approaches was to come up with digital channels, and here I'm talking about e-commerce, so developing e-commerce and also digital payments access in the country. So everything that has to do with digital channels is one of the approaches. Second one, and here the focus is more on individual level, so my insurance, savings, to digital payment, etc. Then we have the second approach, which is actually targeting SMEs, and here how to help them stabilize, because SMEs, especially in the LDCs, have an important role in local economy. So how can we make sure that we help them along the way and to recover from the crisis? And then the last one, which is actually local governments, and this is the area in which we work with performance-based grants. So trying to help in boosting the capacity of these local governments so that they can help in the recovery and from the crisis. Yeah, so at the same time, UNCDF, I would like just to focus on local governments, because this is as I said before, this is the area in which we work with performance-based grants. So as you know, and we have many examples of these around the world during this crisis. So local governments, they are really in the front line in the COVID-19 response, but also in the recovery from COVID-19. And because UNCDF has this tradition of working with local governments, we have published what we call a guidance note for immediate action. So it's a list, a advisory list of guidance on what local governments could do to support in the recovery, be it like in the medium or the long term. So, and one of the actions could be, for instance, increase the capacity of local healthcare systems, sensitization of communities, mobilization of coastal communities because of the proximity with these actors, deliver channels for social protection packages, for instance, and also relief measures for local economies. So they can also be a way of they could support local economies. And basically, we list mainly 3 main sources of finance that could be used in this recovery package, which are own resources, intergovernmental fiscal transfers from national governments or subnational governments. But here I'm going to focus on the intergovernmental fiscal transfers, because this is where the performance-based grants are actually embedded into. When we see what is happening in terms of the measures that have been taken place, to help communities and individuals and households recover and face the crisis, we see also a huge opportunity to also take some lessons from what has been done in terms of COVID-19 packages, response packages. And this is a great opportunity for us to not only think about going back to the business as usual as we had before, but also to what we call the triple benefit opportunity, which is how can we make sure that the recovery will be linked to climate, the human health, at the same time generate prosperity. And then if we take the lessons from the COVID-19 experience, we see that most of the packages, the assistance that has been channeled from national governments to help in the recovery are new and additional finance. And I think this is very important when we think about, especially about COP26 that's going to take place next year, as countries are pledging for new and additional finance on top of development finance. And here are just some of figures from countries and how much they have spent in new and additional finance in terms of the GDP. So I think this is also an opportunity for us to understand also that whatever we do here, it should be even so it's possible to come up with new and additional finance also for climate finance, and not using development finance, which is also very important for development actions. Another lesson that we can take from COVID-19 recovery packages is also that the channels that have been used to channel COVID-19 recovery finance has been targeting those which are most in need. And here I'm talking about individual and households. There are some estimates from IID which says that 90% of the package has been channeled towards these actors. So, and I think we can use the same idea and experience also to think about how can we make sure and use this experience to actually target those groups or those individuals which are most in need in terms of climate change, and especially from a climate change adaptation point of view. And here, when we talk about performance-based grants that I'm going to talk about in the next slide, I think these are a great vehicle to actually deliver effective finance towards the local level where most of the climate change actions will take place. So I think we can use this experience that has been effective in delivering COVID-19 finance and take this experience to also to climate finance. And also, I think that the last point that I could say as an opportunity that a lesson that we can take from experience is also when we think about climate change is very multidimensional. So we cannot look at climate as only as a climate issue, because it's cut across many sectors in many dimensions. So, and I think this experience that we are going through with the COVID, I think showed us how other non-climatic variables can also have huge impact on people's adaptive capacity to cope with climate change impacts. So I think this is also another opportunity for us to think through and make sure that when we are planning climate change, especially climate change adaptation interventions, we need to think through what we call multidimensional risk setting. So we can have really when we include both climate and non-climatic variables in our decision-making process, especially at the local level. Then, like with our experience with PBCRG, which are the performance-based grants experience. So UNCDF has received a lot of requests from our partners, particularly in some countries, to actually help them, especially at the local level I'm talking about, to come up with, to help them in this recovery from COVID-19. So what we tried to do in the first place was to have this, what we call a consultative assessment. Our partners, our local counterparts, so we could actually understand their needs at the local level. Of course, when they sent us their assessment, there were many needs which somehow were beyond climate action. And of course, we had also to look at our envelope portfolio to see what could be accommodated in that sense. So here we were confronted, I think many of you also might have gone through the same, where we are confronted between integrating COVID-19 response and recovery packages into existing portfolio versus repurposing essential climate finance. So I think this is a very important question for us to ask ourselves, because how we make sure that we don't repurpose essential climate finance towards COVID-19, so that we are in a situation where that essential finance, which is already scarce, cannot be implemented for achieving climate goals. So I think this is the first question that we have to ask ourselves about supporting this kind of COVID-19 um, um, recovery packages. And then the idea was then to identify areas in which the performance-based grants could be used, or the system to do that channeling could be used as this delivery mechanism in support of effective COVID-19 packages for recovery and response at the local level. But at the same time, trying to link those actions with increased resilience of both local governments and communities. And here I'm talking about, you have seen that we have a list of possible investments that mechanism. So within those sectors, what could be somehow linked to adaptation and to COVID-19 at the same time? So here we have some, minor rehabilitation of COVID-19 treatment centers, and also small community resilience infrastructure. So here, especially related to water infrastructure. So setting up hand washing stations, water points, and community water points, so they can have piped water easily, and they can also have also other supplies of water easily available to their households. But also, how can we make sure that we help them in procuring and purchasing protective equipment like sanitizers, masks, gloves, etc. And also, we thought that there was also some linkages in terms of outreach activities. How can we, help them in sensitizing communities, having some funds
Rafael,
to actually, yes?
il faudrait, can you make it a bit shorter? We are running out of time.
Yes, actually, this is the last slide. So just an example. So we have done this in Ghana, where we portfolio and then try to integrate COVID-19 measures in the current portfolio. But there's another example in Bangladesh, where we supported the national government to actually capitalize and mobilize additional resources for through emergency operation operate. So adapting the indicators of the performance grants to actually take COVID-19 protocols into account. So this is pretty much our experience, and I'm glad to take any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rafael. Maybe very shortly, as I was wondering, as we see, I mean, you have been working a lot as UNCDF on directing finance funds to attend the problem of COVID crisis, but you also highlighted how it's important to keep working on climate issues. Is there a preoccupation beforehand when you shape how you're gonna manage the funds to have, because at the African level we know that the finance going to adaptation, for example, to climate change are very still low compared to the needs. So for example, I mean, we consider in the roadmap of the coalition, we consider that the cost of adaptation could be by 6% of the African PIB, GDP at the continent level, in a world where the temperature rises 4 degrees. So the needs are huge. Do you think that, for example, what you are doing for COVID response can be used for more for also adaptation plans, and maybe to help African countries in their NDCs that they are supposed to, that we are all supposed to reevaluate for the next COP?
Yeah, Thank you so much for your question. I think that's actually the central question when we, deal with these responses and try to integrate with climate finance. Because when we started receiving requests from local governments, of course, the requests were huge, and many sectors which somehow would not be related. So at first we had this situation in which we had to either repurpose finance or to somehow integrate or seek additional finance to cover those needs. So I think at what we decided, the first place was actually to do this kind of assessment and look at our portfolio and somehow look at the needs that were, sent to us and see what could be integrated into the current portfolio. So to make sure that there are some sectors which somehow could have a win-win situation, like water infrastructure, to make sure that the water infrastructure are strengthened, or food security, for instance. So these are areas in which we found some relation between these two worlds, say, two sectors. At the same time, we also had some revision in our portfolio to see what could be repurposed, but that was somehow the least part of it. And at the same time, we support mobilization of resources, like in the case of Bangladesh. So we helped mobilize additional resources, and I think this is very important for us to have in mind that not all sectors are somehow related to both climate finance and COVID response. So I think we need to have this kind of analysis and assessment, not to divert essential finance.
Yeah, thank you. Many questions about this topic. So, I mean, we will send to everybody more information, your presentation, but yeah, there are many questions ongoing about NDCs and adaptation. Now, Titilope Akosa, Executive Director of the Center for the 21st Century Issues based in Nigeria, will present her activities in response to the COVID crisis. Thank you, Titi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Romain. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here and to share our activities during the COVID times. Yeah, I'm in Lagos, and as you know, Lagos is a densely populated state in Nigeria and is the epicenter of the COVID pandemic in Nigeria. And here in Nigeria, where we had our first index case sometime in February, towards the end of February, and then since then we've been having many more cases, and the government have been really, really very responsive in terms of ensuring that tests are being done every day, and that those who are positive for COVID-19 are isolated in our public health facilities. And right now we're also adding some private facilities into the whole system to ensure that our people are also, we want to ensure that our people overcome the COVID pandemic. For us as a women's group, before the COVID, yes, we've been doing our most important work, which is monitoring the Green Climate Fund for some time now. We do that at the international level, and we also do it at the local level. And also at the African regional level, we mobilize our voices to make inputs into project proposals presented from Africa at the Green Climate Fund Board. So I, as the Gender Monitor for Africa, will normally go to the Green Climate Fund Board to speak on behalf of African women, especially around proposals that are African-based. So for some time, we've been doing that. We get on-ground, real-time information on proposals, especially from where the proposals is emanating from, and we escalate that to the board level to ensure that whatever is being approved for countries in Africa, African women have a voice. And we have been enabled specifically by the fact that the Green Climate Fund is considered gender as a very important issue, even from its outset. And right now, every action plan, every proposal to the GCF board must have a gender action plan. So based on that, it's very important for us as local women to get engaged into this process, not only monitoring the fund to ensure it benefits women on the ground, but also for women to benefit from the funds. And basically, we want local women to actually benefit from this fund. But since the beginning of this pandemic, I would say that our activities have been basically limited rather to online interactions. And for us, local women that we work with, very few of them have access to internet. That is a very big issue for us. So most of the time we interact on ground. That is when there was no pandemic. But during the pandemic, there was lockdown. There were so many things. Then we now decided, what should we do to continue to engage our local women, even to put their voice into what is happening concerning the pandemic. So for us in our organization in Lagos, we put together a COVID coalition. But right now, the COVID coalition, we have many civil society into it, not only women's group, because this is a pandemic and it affects everybody. Yes, we know that women are affected more. But in terms of those who are infected, we have more men being infected than women. But when that happens, you know, it is women that bears the brunt of caring for the men who are really affected. So that has been a big impact on women on the ground. So when we have that, our coalition, what we did is to ensure that we do a lot of sensitization at the local level, offline sensitization. We had one of our sensitization at a riverine area in Lagos, where a lot of them don't even understand the need to wear a mask. Some of them don't even understand why they need to wash their hands always, regularly. Not only how to wash their hands also, how do they use sanitizer? Some of them don't even have funds for alcohol-based sanitizers. And in some communities, we also have that they are not serviced by pipe-borne water. So if you are not serviced with pipe-borne water, how do you wash your hands frequently and regularly? So these are some of the challenges we've been trying to address on behalf of women on the ground. So for us as an organization and as a coalition, what we did was to distribute sanitizers. We also distribute masks. After distributing masks also, we also take up advocacy with the government, because right now we are part of the Emergency Operations Center, the Public Health Emergency Operations Center. That is the decision-making body where every issue around COVID is discussed on a daily basis. So I am a member of that EOC. I monitor what is happening on behalf of women. We make inputs from the civil society point of view, and whatever information we get on the ground, we escalate to the EOC for intervention from the government, the ones that we cannot intervene in. But basically, what we did, like I said, is to give sanitizers, tell government to ensure there is enough water available so that people can maintain the highest standard of hygiene. So these are some of the important things we have done. But for our projects for the Green Climate Fund, just like I said, we continue to link up with our international partners, and that's why we're still linking up with Climate Change. We link up with the GCF CSO observers around the world. And on the ground, we continue to talk to our national designated authority, and we are in constant touch with them right now to start our project all over again, because the lockdown is over and we are gradually easing the lockdown. And as of last week, we've had domestic flights come back. So by August, we should start in a skeletal form to continue to engage the government, to know how much funds has entered into our country, and to see how women have been able to benefit from the funds from the GCF. So we call that project Local Women Engaging Climate Finance and the Green Climate Fund. So that project will start in August. Basically, we are going to be training local women, giving them tools to monitor funds and where the funds are, basically following where the funds are, and also asking government that, yes, these are women-led projects, these are projects that are going to benefit women, then we need some funding, we need to benefit so that we can carry out our implementation of critical projects that benefit women on the ground. So basically, that is what we've been doing during this COVID. And though some of our women cannot or does not have access to internet, but some of us who have internet, we have a place where we call a situation room. And in the situation room, we discuss all the issues. As at 2 days ago, we had a discussion around schools reopening, because reopening of school is so very important to us as women, because our children have been at home for almost 4 months now. Nobody's going to school. And how will learning continue, even if we don't have to have it in the 4 walls of the school? So learning must continue either at home or in school. So we are engaging the government now to see how, if we have to reopen the schools, what kind of infection and prevention control mechanisms needs to be put in place so that our children are not infected. And even if we are not going to reopen, how do we get learning into for them right at home? So there is what we call the learning through the radio, which the government has put in place. Yes, it's working, but not all community people have radio at home. So in some community, we have decided we work with the community to have a radio station in a very conspicuous part of the community, where children, even in their houses, can hear the radio clearly. The radio can blare when the learning is going on the radio. So that program is done for children in primary school and in secondary school in Lagos State. So we've been monitoring it, and in some communities where they could not afford the radio, some of our civil society come to their help. And then in between, there are some palliatives that were given to the women, especially local women, by the government, though it couldn't go around, but at least it was a good try for the women. So we've been trying to cope, and we know that as we go gradually and open up the space, things may not be as they used to be. Even as women, we need to rethink how to engage government, which we always do now during the situation. What are the most important mechanisms that the government needs to put in place to ensure that we have a healthy environment where everybody will thrive, and ensure that people are not further infected by the pandemic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Titi. I was wondering, this GCF fund, which you were mentioning a bit before, is it at Lagos level, or is it going to be broader, involving more countries around? This is one aspect. And one other aspect I think is interesting, maybe, is to know, with your organization, have you been developing activities to support the income for women in a situation where, because we know that a lot of women are in the informal sector, they need to have support in terms of income? And try to make it short, please, because we are running out of time.
Yeah, looking at the income support for women, it's a big area in which we are looking into, which we are also escalated to the government. Unfortunately, the government has a ministry they call the Ministry of Wealth Creation, which we are engaging with. And they are trying, first of all, to give a conditional cash transfer to women. And then secondly, to empower women to do businesses, to give them some grants that they can use to start business, or those who have lost their businesses during the pandemic to restart their business all over again. So they are going to be given as much as little as 20,000, 50,000 naira, and if I say maybe $100, between $100 and $50, it's a lot of money to start business here in Nigeria. Okay. So a lot of women are going to benefit in this. So we are pushing to ensure that local women benefit from this grant from the government. But at the national level, our training is national concerning the Green Climate Fund. So we are engaging a broad range of women from across Nigeria, because we are going to have our training in the southwest of Nigeria. We are going to have one in the south of Nigeria, and we are going to have one in Abuja, which is this, the capital of Nigeria, where we are going to have all the leaders of women's group converge in Abuja, so that whatever we train them, they take it back to their various organizations, and then we have a rippling effect of what we are doing in terms of training women, giving them the tools to monitor government in terms of the Green Climate Funds and how women are benefiting, and ensuring that women also benefit from these funds on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Titi. Well, I encourage everybody to look at the Center for the 21st Century. It's really impressive what you're doing, and we will send also more information after the webinar. Thank you. Thierry Chekpo. Now I'm giving the Thierry Chekpo. Maintenant, je vous passe la parole.
Okay, moving to English now. From the Groupement intercommunal in Benin, we would like to hear from you how the local authorities have been really at the forefront of the organization directly concerned by the crisis. What has been your experience in Benin? What is the connection and the link you have made on the national level and a local level, on a local authority level? So what has been the connection for you, Thierry? Thank you.
C'est bon?
C'est bon.
Ok, très bien. Merci beaucoup, Romain.
Thank you very much, Romain. Hi, everyone. I'm Thierry Chekpo, in charge of mission for partnership and communication in their intercommunal Collines community. Collines Hill is a department in Benin. It's a central region of Benin, made up of 6 municipalities, about 14,000 square meters, kilometers, sorry, and we're about 800,000 people living there. The climate, to give you a quick overview, and this climate is shared between the climate change of the northern part of the country and the southern part of the country. We have our own climate model, which is in our own department, but we have also the influence of the 2 hubs, the North Hub and the Southern Hub, which is a very difficult and hybrid context that makes things difficult to control. So in this context, it's mainly an agricultural region, land. We don't have a lot of rich people living there. So we are talking about smaller scale. From Benin, if we were to look and count all the local authorities making effort in this climate change issue, I think probably you would not find 2 without talking about the south. In terms of climate planification or planning, we are very much upfront and in advance. I have to mention also the GERES NGOs. The GERES organization has really helped us and been supportive in this issue of climate change. And we've just completed a program.
Alors, c'est bon, ça suit?
Oui, c'est bon.
Ah, d'accord. Donc, projet ce matin, c'est entendu.
This project concerns climate and energy adaptation in rural area. We have to deal with the climate issues and the structure of the stakeholders to allow the sharing of information and training and the development of actions within the various municipalities. So the phase one of the project has just been completed. We are just about to starting phase two of the program with just to come back to finance access to finance. What I'm saying is that it is not easy for the local authorities in Benin in terms of financing or funding scheme. We have the National Fund for Environment and Climate, which is part of the Ministry of Sustainable Development. And every year they call for projects and they try to select various initiatives and actions which are very performant, and they are the one that will benefit from microfinance. But yet we should mention a few aspects that you might be interested in. Is that in Benin, I don't know if this is the same elsewhere, but our criteria for selecting projects, whether it be for the local authorities, are we talking about rural territories or large cities, or whether we're talking about large NGOs or local, smaller NGOs, the criteria remains the same. So for us as local authority, it's an issue. Everyone talks about access to finance, but in terms of efforts, in terms of implementation of the various mechanisms, people do not take into account the various specificities and the various contexts. So I think the first speaker spoke about various criteria, and my question really is that in my own context here in our region, would it not be easier to actually one day meet his criteria, the criteria that we were presented beforehand, than what we are asked? It would be a lot easier for us, I believe. For example, the performance-based criteria or the questionnaire which we have to fill every now and again, it's not when you receive the questionnaire that you have to start structuring all this data. We have to anticipate what is asked and required of us. And we have to implement the various schemes for data collecting to be able to meet these criteria that we receive every now and again. So the issue is to know whether or not we have the necessary means to actually go into details and meet all the criteria and the information that we are asked in the questionnaire. This is a very difficult thing for us to do. And if you can't do it, then you miss out on the finance and the funding. And this happened a lot on the international level. Now, for the national level, it is the same. We have that difficulty trying to meet the criteria. And just to connect with what has been happening with the COVID crisis, once again, what we can learn from this situation, this pandemic, and the difficulty of access to finance, climate finance, we have to think about access to climate finances in a global way, and not just look at some events and action. We have to think more broadly. We are leading and carrying some actions, but if we've had a natural phenomenon that has been imposed to us, that we've not been able to use all the mechanisms that we have developed. So what what is the backup that we can rely on? We will continue to develop actions, or should we stop our actions to face the crisis and then pick up from where we left? For example, our internet connection is not very good. So during that crisis, so it's obvious that all of our actions had to stop during that time. So all the monitoring and the follow-up of all these actions had to stop, and that put everything on the ground. We're not even able to forecast the future in that situation. So these are the kind of issues that we are facing. So my colleague who was to be here, unfortunately, has had a health crisis. So he's in the hospital at the moment. So that's why I'm here talking to you. And thank you very much for listening. Yes, indeed, your colleague who was to be with us, he's in hospital, and we hope he makes a quick recovery. We hope it too. We've only got about 10 minutes left. So I think I'm going to move on quickly to Justine Audrain from the FMDV, Deputy Program Director from the FMDV. And I think she will have some element of response exactly on what Thierry was just talking about, especially the decentralization of the access to climate financing. This is what the FMDV is doing, mainly because they are supporting local authorities, mainly in Africa, regarding access to finance, climate finance. So I'm just going to ask you the question, actually, and according to you, Justine, how did this crisis maybe speed up? In which way did it speed up this access to climate fund, or is it not the case? Thank you very much, Romain. Before I can maybe answer your question, I'd just like to quickly present what we're doing at the FMDV, which is the Monetary Fund for City Development. We are here to support and support finance for development, for urban development, integrated urban development. We work as a support to local and central governments to mobilize technical and engineering and financial engineering expertise. This is what Romain was saying, really, and to actually meet the issue of digitalization and evaluate and assess the criteria for accessing finance climate. So more generally speaking, and because of this crisis, what we have observed at our organization is that locally the risk due to the lack of solvency has increased, unfortunately, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa, where financial autonomy is not quite as developed, and also and this is what has made investors a bit more careful. Once again, this gap to access for climate finances has become more of an issue. Just to give you some figures, we believe that this crisis has led to a decrease or reduction of 30% and even up to 50% of reduction to access if we include everything. So this is a major crisis, of course, and it is a major tax crisis and a major crisis for autonomy, financial autonomy. And of course, we are also seeing that there is a decreased reduction of the state financing because they have to focus, governments have to focus on their main activities. Also to underline another paradox, which we are seeing here, which is really at the crossroads of local authorities and the local actors and the financial institutions. The funders, whether they be private or public, are not in a position to release the funds, or to draw from the funds. just to give you another figure, what we call project facilities to help actors, stakeholders prepare their projects, have a rate of disbursement of 50%. On the other hand, for the funders or funding bodies, is the capacity to access smaller funds. A lot of them actually, a lot of the funding bodies like to focus on larger sums. So for local authorities, and this is what Thierry was saying, that there is a diversity of local authorities, especially in the smaller cities. The access to funding is much more difficult, and therefore the access to diversity of financing, they have to increase their level of and it become more complex, more difficult, especially in this COVID-19 situation. So unfortunately, I don't have enough time, but just to remind you quickly what we do as FMDV and our three main axes and focus, and this will probably answer some of the questions that have been raised from the Benin point of view. Our first axis of action is to actually support the local actors in the conception of their operational solutions and strategies for the local territories. And we have an action, whether on the international scale or the regional scale, especially with an access to a special fund, and also on the regional level with the financial decentralization. And we are working with the monetary West African body and the various financial institutions of the local authorities. And also on the national scale, we are working directly with the various ministries in charge of decentralization and cities development to structure the financing. So we try to work beforehand or upstream to make sure that these projects can actually meet the criteria that Thierry was talking about. On the other hand, we have another axis, which is to develop national projects, which are not only international, but national projects that would actually meet the local needs. And then one of the last thing and the last axis we've been working on is, of course, the local scale. And I will talk about this later on, but we work mainly on various innovative approaches with local authorities. Now, this is for the first axis. Now, the second axis is to also organize a convergence of all the stakeholders with all the projects. What we're trying to do is actually to try to structure various covenants of various covenant alliances to give birth to these various projects at a national level. We have also organized last June with the with Morocco a conference of African ministers, ministries of the cities regarding economic recovery. And lastly, we also, and this is something very important, we also take part in the international debate about access to finance. I would maybe mention just the finance leadership alignment, which is really the grouping for finance that we work with. So just as a conclusion and to open up the debate, we have very little time left now, but I would like also to highlight this issue and what is at stake for the local authorities is the diversity of access to funding and access to smaller funds. What we've noticed is that for local actors, stakeholders, they've had to face the issue or the challenge of being able to include local projects and access to larger financing, and also find innovative projects and ideas to be able to access other funding. Just to mention three very innovative approaches that we are supporting. The first one is the project coaching. We really support and we organize coaching sessions with the local authorities so that they can improve their projects and to help them access a dialogue with the various actors of the finance, access to finance. And this has helped local authorities to access really interesting funding. The second approach is what we call a participative budget, which is something very popular at the moment, and it really helps citizens to take part in a project by participating. This is a citizen commitment, if you like, at a local level, and that really goes in the same direction as decentralization. And the last approach, which is very innovative, is what we call the living labs. Living labs, these are laboratories. Rather than having stakeholders that are scattered or that are in various places, is to actually create some form of ecosystem where the technology stakeholders, financing stakeholders, public stakeholders can converge in one place and can test their various approaches or means. And this time is often very long. So we're actually working, and this will be my very last word. We are working with our African partners, especially with the city of Kampala in Uganda. We are implementing the first living lab for green technology in partnership with Paris and Johannesburg. Great. Thank you very much, Justine. This was very relevant, and I have to draw the conclusion now, to come to the conclusion in a few short minutes. Indeed, I would encourage you to look at our website, Climate Chance, with the financing coalition that the FMDV is leading. And I have read that Mr. Titilope and also the GRS, which is why we had someone from Benin with us today. So this coalition has already made some proposal, very practical proposal to make access easier for non-state organizations. And this is what Justine has been talking about. This is more of our advocacy. Our small contribution as climate change is to try to organize all this information, and I have a lot of questions actually regarding where to find information regarding current financing, especially for smaller actors, smaller authorities, smaller NGOs. We work at, and this is really the very beginning of what we're doing, but we are working at developing a portal where we would be grouping smaller financing or funding under 1 million euros that will be accessible to smaller NGOs. This is both an English and French portal. So if maybe among those who are listening to us, if you have information, please share it with us, share with Climate Change team, and we will try to implement this in the coming months. This is a huge work we are doing at the moment. And if you have other questions, more specific questions, please contact us live, or you can write to us at association@climatechange.org. You will receive the feedback and the summary of the session, and please continue to send us all your Q&A. And thank you everyone for taking part. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you for the great participation. We had about 100 people. Thank you to our interpreter who has stayed with us. Please do not hesitate to follow our next webinar. The next one will be next Thursday from 3 to 4. There will be a virtual workshop on a particular topic. So wishing you all a nice day, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Ouais, c'est bon.